Hey world, it's me, Jack Wallen, and boy do I have something to say. I usually do. But hey, we're both here, so why not just sit back and listen to me for a moment? Because I think what I have to say today might be pretty important to you. Now, you're probably used to me talking mostly to artists and writers and all that, but this time, although what I am going to speak about does pertain to artists of all sorts, it can actually be applied to humanity in general, to your life, as it were. What I want to talk about today is very simple, can be summed up in a single sentence. Don't rush to the end. What am I talking about? Let me explain. Way back when I first started writing, I had a few really bad habits. And by a few, I mean a whole lot. Yeah, like they were embarrassing. They were so bad. But I was young. I was new. I had no idea what I was doing. I had been an actor for a very long time, never studied writing, and I just decided, let's try this. One of my really bad habits, however, was diving into a story, getting lost in the beginning, in the middle, and getting so excited about how it developed that I just rushed to the end of it. Just somewhere after the climax of the story, I'd be like, I want to get this over with now. And I'm fairly certain that you understand what happens then. So everything from the climax to the end of the story gets compressed. And you lose out on some very important moments. But why does it happen? Well, there's a number of reasons why it happens. Sometimes it happens just because you're very excited to finish this project, especially when you're first starting out writing. You start writing a book and you're so thrilled that it's happening, and you get to the middle of the book, and then you get to the climax of the book, and the denouement happens, and you're like, oh my gosh, I did this, and you forget to finish it. It's almost like it starts, it hits the middle, and bam, it's done. And you forget that there's a lot of resolution that needs to happen, that you need to take your time to get to the end. Because if you rush to the end, you're cheating your story and your readers. It's not good. Another reason that it happens, I think, is that a lot of writers tend to want to place a lot of emphasis on the beginning and the middle of the book, and they forget how important the ending is. You have to remember, your readers are going along for the ride, and they're hooked. They are invested in your story. And if you truncate the end, if you're going along, and then the end, they're going to feel cheated. They're not only going to feel cheated, they're going to feel frustrated, and they're going to feel like the story didn't actually come to any sort of completion. And yeah, of course, there's the whole idea of the cliffhanger. And I like a good cliffhanger. I like good cliffhangers in movies and in TV and in books. But the problem with executing a cliffhanger improperly is that you can't let the story just suddenly end. You still have to have that denouement. You still have to have all that resolution. You still have to give your readers a chance to breathe and go, okay. The big thing happened. We hit the top of the roller coaster. Now we got to go down. But, I'm going to stick with that analogy. Imagine you're on a roller coaster. This really massively fun and thrilling roller coaster. You get to the top of the highest hill, and it turns that corner and it dives. But instead of the bottom of the dive going whee, it just goes chonk. That doesn't work. Not only would people die, people would not ever want to get on that ride again. So you can't just let the end of your story go chonk. You got to allow the reader to go whee. You got to even have the opportunity at the end of the story when it goes down to make it go flat and then maybe go up a little bit. tease the reader a little bit, and then go back down and flatten out. Or even go back down and go back down a nice little gentle hill till it comes to a nice rest. That doesn't mean that the end of the book has to be all nice and flowy and easy. It can still come to a jarring end. But you've got to give those readers time to breathe and accept what has happened. There used to be a classical radio station in Indy where I lived for about 20 years. And they had this wonderful habit that after the end of each piece of music they played, they would pause for a bit of silence, usually like 5 seconds. And the reason why they did that was to allow the listener to come to a sense of closure with the piece of music. Because they felt like if the piece of music ended and they immediately started in with their spiel, it would jar the listeners. So they gave it time to breathe. And I cannot express how important that is for the end of your book. But it doesn't just apply to writing. Not rushing to the end applies to painting. Imagine you're painting this glorious piece of work and it's going along beautifully and it's going along, and all of a sudden you might get tired of painting this one thing. So you're like, I'm just done with it. And you make that last brush stroke. You're like, I'm done. That's it. I'm done. Is it really complete though? And that's an issue. Now, here's the thing. I know. I'm right now. I'm rereading Violent Delights 4, Deadly Resolution. I always forget what that is. Violent Delight 4, Deadly Resolution. I'm rereading it right now, knowing, because I have to, after I finish the first draft, I always go back and reread it to clean it up before I send it to beta readers. But I know. I'm about 3/4 of the way through. I'll get to the I know in a second. I'm about 3/4 of the way through, and I know for a fact that I rushed the end of this book. So it doesn't just happen to new writers, it happens to all of us. And this is like my 60th book. I've been writing for 30 years, and I know that I rushed it. And I know that I'm going to have to, when I get to the end, I'm going to know it, I'm going to sense it, I'm going to feel it, because it's just going to go chunk. And I've got to go back there and give that ending room to breathe. I've got to resolve a couple of things. Not just plot things. I've got to resolve character things and narrative things. But I know this. I know this going into it. So as soon as I'm going to feel it. I'm going to sense it. I'm going to, as soon as when I get towards the end of it, I'm going to feel it start to rush a little bit. Because this book was a little longer than the other ones. And I started to go, okay, I've got to get this done. I've got to stop this. I've got to end this book. I don't want it to get too long because I don't want to drag it out too much. So I just went chonk. I ended it. And as soon as I finished it and I went back and started rereading it, I knew that I rushed the ending, and I knew that I was going to have to fix it at the end. But rushing the ending doesn't just apply to artistic endeavors. Before I get there, I want to backpedal a little bit, because I want to apply it to another artistic endeavor, acting. One of the things that I adore acting. It was my first passion. And one of the things I have experienced over the years, especially when working with green younger actors, is that towards the end of the play, they start telegraphing the end. They start telling their audience what's going to happen at the end before the end happens. I know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's like you know at the end of the play that everything hopefully is going to resolve. And all of the big plot points are going to come to closure and all that. And prior to, and I'm just making this up right now, prior to that closure, there's maybe 15, 20 minutes of real tension that comes from the climax. The denouement is a very tense thing. But some actors want to get to that end because, and I'm not disparaging anybody, I'm not making fun of anybody, but there are some actors out there that want to get to the end because they want to get to the curtain call. So they might allow that closure to happen before it should. So instead of carrying that tension to the point where it finally does actually resolve according to the play and the director, they let it happen a little earlier. You got to keep it going. Whatever the director has told you to do, you got to keep it going. Because if you don't, you're rushing the end. Now let's go forward again, and I want to talk about how this doesn't just apply to artistic endeavors. You've probably heard someone say, be it famous or not, that life is about the journey. It's not about the destination. I go on walks a lot, and I have had some of my best ideas hit me when I'm out on a walk, because I'm not stressed. I'm not concerned or worried about anything. I'm just there on the walk. And when I first started doing this, years and years and years ago, I would set out on my walk and almost immediately start thinking about the end of my walk. Because sometimes maybe I would treat myself to something at the end of my walk. Or I knew that I had something to do at the end of my walk. So from the very beginning of that walk, I was thinking about the end of the walk. I was rushing to the end. Not that my pace was rushing. I wasn't running. It was a walk, because walks and runs are different. But as soon as I set out, I was rushing to get to the end. And when I did that, I missed out on everything from the beginning to the end. So that whole middle section, if it were a book or a play, I was missing out on the inciting incident, the climax, the denouement, and for all that stuff in between. All there was the beginning and the end. It's the journey. The journey is the thing. And if you don't allow yourself to focus on what happens between the beginning and the end, you're missing out on all the good stuff. And no matter what you do, if you rush to the end, you're not doing yourself any favors, be it as an artistic endeavor or just an adventure, a vacation, a moment with someone you love. If you don't enjoy the journey, you're missing out on so much. Because in that journey, wonderful things will happen. If on those walks that I would take, that as soon as my foot stepped right out the door, I was immediately thinking about when my foot would come back into the house. If I did that, when I did that, I missed out on inspiration. Because one of the reasons why I take walks is to find inspiration. Because trust me, when you open your eyes and your mind and your heart up to inspiration in 360 degrees, you will find it everywhere. And if you're rushing to the end, you're going to miss all of it. And this doesn't necessarily directly relate to patience or pace. You can go out for a walk and still take it at a nice brisk pace and not miss anything. As long as going at that nice brisk pace, not thinking about what's there at the end. When I run marathons, I don't think about the finish line. Granted, I'm not running, it's not my job. I'm not running to get paid. I don't get paid to run. I run to enjoy it. But I don't ever think about the finish line. I think about everything around me. I think about what's happening now, in that moment, because that is precious. And it's the same thing with your artistic endeavors. If the only thing that matters to you is the beginning and the end, your book, your play, your painting, your song, your dance, your sculpture, it's all going to be hollow. It's going to be missing all of the real important bits, the meat. It's like all of a sudden you've made a sandwich out of 2 pieces of bread. You've made a bread sandwich. Top is the beginning, bottom is the end, slammed together. There's your lunch. It's not very enjoyable, is it? Don't rush to the end. Take your time, do it right, honor your craft and your readers or your audience. And when you do that, your work will grow exponentially. And that's all I have to say today. Thank you so very much for being a part of my world. It means the world to me. And I hope that I've helped you with something today, or maybe I've entertained you or whatever. And if, as usual, if you know somebody that might benefit from hearing this, share it with them. Because sharing is caring. And if you like what you hear, subscribe to my channel. You know how to do it. It's like hit the little subscribe button. Yeah, that's what it is. Anyway, most important, I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful day, but don't rush to the end.